Push the Point are now partnered with Living Realms, a pioneering local game store for Flesh and Blood in the UK from the very beginning. Push the Point patrons now get 5% discount on the Living Realms online store, so go check it out. Please enjoy the episode.
Hello everyone and welcome to Push the Point. It's me, Dan, and we've got a very special... No, it's Simon, everyone. It's not...
Me.
We thought we would do a deck tech on Katsu, Simon's... I guess it's your speciality hero. It's at the very least the hero you've been playing the longest in Classic Constructed, right?
Yeah, it's my OG hero in Classic Constructed. And I wouldn't take this as a definitive deck tech on Katsu and Outsiders. It's my first impressions and the things I was drawn to test in the first instance. So hopefully it will be of use for at least somewhere to get started and see some of the pitfalls and traps and mistakes that I've made.
Yeah, totally. And if you're interested in more deck tech content, I recommend that you subscribe to Push the Point on YouTube. We've done quite a few deck techs over the years with like some really talented players, and we tend to focus on, when we know that we're particularly good at a certain hero, or we know someone that's particularly good at a certain hero. Obviously, like Simon's saying, it's very early days with Katsu, but we think we've got something special to share with you and a place for you to start off from at the very least. Before we get stuck in, just want to shout out to Living Realms. Get off that Lorcana. Let's look at calling Birmingham instead. We are partnered with Living Realms. If you are a Push the Point patron, you get a 5% discount off the Living Realms store. So if you're looking to pick up some Outsiders, some Flesh and Blood Blitz decks that are coming out with Outsiders, recommend becoming a patron because it's only £3 a month for our lowest tier. And I mean, you can do the math yourself, but you don't have to spend a huge amount of money on the website to essentially make all of that money back. So it's strongly recommended, and you get to join our Patreon Discord where we actually share. We've been Simon, I've seen you've been sharing a lot of your decks already with your Katsu builds with the patrons and everything so far already. So
yeah, we try and share thoughts on how we're playing, what we're playing. I think it's quite a nice constructive space for people to have a chat and talk about the game. So
yeah,
enjoy.
So huge thanks to Living Realms for partnering with us. We're very excited about the calling Birmingham, and we're very excited about Outsiders. We think we're getting some products soon from Living Realms, so we will share that with you, the opening of that when it comes. So let's talk about the deck, Simon. So I've got the deck up in front of me, so everyone can see it at home. What we're going to do is Simon's just gonna work through. We're gonna I'm going to try and not interrupt him too much. So he's going to talk through the deck itself and where he's at with it, and kind of give us his thoughts on the way he's built it. So Simon, just take it away and let us know about your amazing Katsu deck.
Well, yeah, it's amazing. Maybe. Thanks, Dan. I think I want to start by prefacing this. For the last few months, I've been playing Katsu in CC on like a Tigers build. So working on Roar of the Tiger, Art of War, and Predatory Streak, and then building into a Tiger Swipe turn or a multiple Tiger Swipe turn. This is what you're looking at here is a hark back to my first RTN days where we were heart and cross strap, surging strike line. At the time we had leg tap line, and no 100 wins. So this is sort of a development on a mid-range aggro Katsu deck which has multiple on-hit triggers and forces the opponent to think about blocking and how they're blocking. Just for some context, I've played 22 games with this deck over the weekend in 3 different iterations. My overall win rate is 77%, so just under 80%. My win rate going second is 92%. My win rate going first is 50%, so 55%.
I was looking at this earlier and I was like, 93% win rate going second is pretty high. Yeah.
Sorry. Beer is important. So my major losses are to Azalea.
Yeah.
And I think you can understand if you've seen any Azalea's new tools and combine that with things like Red in the Ledger, which she had from her very first set, you can see why that might be an issue for someone like Katsu with lots of go again and wanting to go wide. And my only other loss has been to Katsu in the mirror. And again, if you go first in the mirror, you're probably already at a disadvantage. So let's look at the deck very quickly, or start from the beginning. I mean, equipment's important in CC. We know that. I've reverted back to the breaking scales for our arm rather than Tiger Stripe Shuko, and that's because there are fewer 2 base power attack cards in the deck, and therefore you're less likely to be getting value out of the Tiger Stripe. But also a lot of combo cards in this deck, so having the +1 available on any combo card is pretty amazing. And we'll come back to that later when we talk about the Shuriken, one of the new Majestic cards. Obviously the weapons, we've stuck with Kodachi's. Chest piece, I've got 2 in the deck, a Heart and Cross Trap and a Tunic. For the majority of the aggro matchups, we're going to stick with the Heart and Cross Trap. The fact that it gives you 2 resources to play your first attack action card is pretty phenomenal value off a common, basically.
Yeah.
The headpiece is Mask of Momentum. In some matchups like Oldham and Icelander, I swap in the Mask of the Pouncing Lynx, and I aim to get minimum 5 damage off an extra card with the Mask of the Pouncing Lynx. Obviously, in those 2 heroes, you're less likely to be threatening mask triggers because they're either blocking you more or taxing your attacks more.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting. I mean, there's a school of thought going around. This was particularly with Phi, that essentially you just always run Mask because it represents essentially like telling your opponent, okay, you're starting this game with 35 health essentially, because at some point I will pop Mask and I will hit you after you.
Mask of the Pouncing Lynx.
Yeah, Mask of the Pouncing Lynx, because I've hit you beyond your ability to block anymore, so it kind of secures that damage at some point in the game. But you're main decking Mask of Momentum, and are you just finding that the value you're getting out of the forced blocks is just really positive for you? Like how is that card playing out for you actually in games?
For me, I think it's I personally think it's a no-brainer. I think it changes the way your opponent plays in a way that makes your game plan overall easier. They're always looking for the 3rd chain link to block, and they will always block something during their turn unless they've got the nuts. Unless they've got the absolute turn of dreams, they're going to block. If you want to get cards out of hand and you're able to make at minimum 3 chain links, they're going to block with 1 or 2 cards, which is fantastic for us. I'm happy with that. I just think on a turn-by-turn basis, it does more in most matchups than the Mask of the Pouncing Lynx. But the reason we have it is for certain the Mask of the Pouncing Lynx is for certain matchups.
Yeah,
where that's not the case.
Against Oldham, it can be really, really good, and generally, like, what is there a particular card that you're fetching with links in those matchups? I assume it's a combo ender, or is there a particular 2 power card?
It's quite handy. The one that's most consistent at the moment is to go and fetch Winds of Eternity. So you play your 100 Winds red, and then you go into Winds of Eternity. And if you're doing that comes in for 4. If you're doing that with an Art of War up, you get 5 out of it, and you get some card recursion as well. So it's definitely not a bad tactic. I think, again, because it specifies 2 or less base power, there are limited cards you can go and get. I have tried the deck with Salt the Wound, and I think I may revisit that. I haven't got it in the deck for this iteration, but it is that sort of one-off card that you can go and get and hopefully get 5, 6, 7 damage out of for free because they blocked with everything else. Like, I think that's a reasonable shout.
The other thing, no, go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, what we haven't talked about is Mask of Many Faces, which is a new common from Outsiders, which looks to be fantastic. I would say its place is probably in Blitz, definitely in Limited. I don't think it offers enough threat in CC yet.
Yeah, Mask of Many Faces seems like it's, in a low health format where a single huge turn could potentially win you the game.
Yeah.
That feels really, really strong, being able to... It's almost like you can create two combo lines in one combo line by, making your whelming is suddenly called surging or whatever you want to be doing. It's a really interesting card, but I think, you're right. For CC, maybe we'll see something particularly clever. But I wanted to just go back quickly to the breaking scales. You just run the scale breaking scales and obviously null rune gloves as your arm piece. I do understand the not wanting the Shuko. You do run. You don't really run too many cards where you're getting the buff on your Lord of Wind or Dishonor, because you're not running, say for example, like a yellow Whelming Gust Wave or a blue Bonds of Eternity.
Yeah.
Have you experimented at all with the new legendary from Outsiders, the knife throwing card, as it were? Yeah, Flick Knives.
I've seen it come up in opponents' armories on online testing, and it definitely has an interesting mechanic. And I think the fact that it can prolong your Mask of Momentum chains, for example, has a really interesting feel to it. But then you have to play your Concealed Blade. Is it Concealed Blade?
To bring back the knives.
To bring back the knives, and you have to have those in your deck. So they have to be daggers. So obviously, Katsu has access to Kodachis. He has access to Zephyr Needle. So there is an argument to say you could build a deck around that mechanic. This is not that deck. But I think, again, it's one of those, you have to build your deck around it. Those Kodachis and those Zephyr Needles take up deck building spots. So to be in your armory, in your inventory, sorry, is the word that we're using, isn't it?
Yeah.
Then you have to, they have to take up spots of other cards. And for me, I'm not comfortable doing that at the moment, because I think Katsu is very tight on space anyway. It may be that it works more in Assassin than it does in Ninja, but I'm sure someone will make a deck. I'm absolutely sure someone will build around it and will have a very successful deck, because it will take people by surprise.
Yeah, and I think the last thing before we move on to the deck, I don't want to spend too much time talking about the equipment, is you're obviously running the Breeze Rider boots in the main deck slot, and no Snapdragon Scalers. So, I mean, what are you thinking, Simon? Like, you can't not run Snapdragon Scalers in a Ninja deck. I mean, this is just obscene. We should just stop this interview right now, as far as I'm concerned. But I'm willing to give you an opportunity to defend yourself.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right, and it felt disgusting to me. Every Ninja deck I've run has run Snapdragon Scalers up until now. Again, it comes down to what you're trying to achieve with the piece of equipment. Now, when we go through the deck, you will see that most cards have either innate go again, or they're a combo card. There are a couple of exceptions. So, although the Breeze Rider boots do require the card to hit, I'm running enough innate go again that during a turn when I need the Breeze Rider boots, I'm likely to hit at least once. And they block for 1. So it does offer me it catches me back up to that sort of Tiger Stripe Shuko level where I've got 2 armor that I can use sort of readily, because it's got Battle Worn 1 armor. And for the turns where I'm needing go again, it gives me access to that. So at the moment, I stress at the moment, I'm not missing Snapdragon Scalers. but there may be a point where I put them back in, maybe for certain matchups, maybe for every matchup. But
Yeah, I
when
think
we
I
go,
I think I made a joke at one point that we managed, us ninja players managed to sneak in one last battle worn ninja equipment in Crucible of War before LSS probably realised that maybe ninja shouldn't be getting battle worn.
Yeah.
But we managed to get breaking scales and bruiser rider boots. And I think what you're saying about being able to match that block of Shuko, and in fact, actually even more flexibility than
split
Shuko,
block,
yeah, because you're losing the no block of snaps with a flexible one block on Breeze Rider boots, and what with all these azaleas and all these on hits knocking about, actually maybe that's actually quite nice to have.
Yeah, absolutely. And it doesn't just apply to one attack in a turn; it applies to all combo cards that turn. So I have had ridiculous Surging Strike line turns where I've broken the boots and been able to follow up a full Lord of Wind line with either multiple Lord of Winds after that, or going into Ancestral Bonds when we talk about that card, or Bonds of Ancestry, sorry. When we go into that card, having to follow that up with multiple combo cards that don't have an 8 go again, or using the Dishonor line and then following it on with multiple attacks. If you can get one or two attacks afterwards, then you've easily made your money back on Breeze Rider boots.
Right, let's get stuck into the deck itself. I mean, normally when we talk about an aggro deck, we focus mainly on the reds and we skip over the blues as if they're not important. But that's not really the case with Katsu, because so much of your combo line is dependent on those finishes, and in this deck, some of the most important finishes are blue. But let's start perhaps by you just running through your main 60 cards and what led to you reaching this as your current 60.
So I will start with the blues as we talk about that. In my Tigers deck, I run 14 blues. In this deck, the main deck runs 16 blues because, as you can see, there are some slightly more expensive cards in there. They're all 0 cost blues, and they are all 3 blocks, apart from Be Like Water, which is a 2 block. 3 of those, and 1 Silverwind Shuriken, which is a 0 block. Those 2 cards specifically have been new additions in my 3rd iteration of the deck, and the Be Like Waters have replaced 100 Winds blue, and the Silverwind Shuriken has replaced the Knives Out. You need 0 cost blues in this deck to power everything. A 0 cost blue will give you a Kodachi 1 cost turn. It will give you a Kodachi Surging Strike Whelming turn. It's just the engine of the deck. And in the main deck, I have, as I say, 16 blues. In the sideboard, I have an extra 3 blues for the matchups like Icelander and Oldhim, where you may need some extra resources. Now, moving on from the blues, one thing I should say is there are 3 combo line finishers in the blues. So the Dishonor, Lord of Wind, and Winds of Eternity are all combo line finishers. They're all 2 base attack cards, so you can go and fetch them with Mask of the Pouncing links, or you can get them off Katsu triggers. So they're very useful to have in the deck, and they're essential for late game. Looking at the rest of the deck, you will probably see that the main line or the main starter that we're running is Surging Strike, and we run 3 reds and 3 yellows, because if you don't have a Surging Strike in hand, it's a bit of a feels bad. You've got so many combo pieces for that line, and now with Outsiders, for the first time, we're seeing a line that diverges at not just the 2nd step, but also the 3rd step. So with the card Bonds of Ancestry, it just specifies a card with Gustwave in its name to hit the combo effect. So that could be a Surging Strike into a Whelming Gustwave, as we've been very used to, but it could also be a Surging Strike into Descendant Gustwave. And that gives us a lot of options. So if you've got a Surging Strike, you can play that out. If you hit, you can go and find a Whelming, you can go and find a Descendant. It doesn't matter which, if you've already got the Bonds of Ancestry in arsenal or in hand, it keeps things going and can offer a lot of damage. Although the Bonds of Ancestry and the Descendant Gustwave cost 2 and 1 respectively, if you play them with combo, they cost 0, which I think is fantastic.
Yeah, because this is the thing, right? Is that the whelming line? It used to be that you'd sort of play it off a blue, right? Because it's 2 costs for surging, 1 cost for Megenshi, whelming is free, and Lord of Wind is free. But now you've got the 2 cost of the surging, but now you can actually go surging, and then Descendant is free, Bonds is free, and then Dishonor is free. So you're actually, it's kind of costing you 1 less resource for that line, which frees you up for a Kodachi or something else you might want to do to enable that kind of turn, or maybe even Art of War. That's pretty nice. Another card that costs 1. So it feels like, I mean, I remember seeing Descendant Gustwave and I was like, nah, it sucks because it costs 1. And then I read the card and then I was like, okay, it sucks a little bit less because it's free, but it's still annoying that it costs 1 because it means I can't banish it or I can't pitch it for a Kodachi in a pinch. Then I saw that it actually has go again anyway. And I was like, okay, so Descendant's kind of like its own mini combo starter. Yeah.
Yeah. And having a Descendant and Bonds in hand is pretty useful. Obviously you're not getting the +2 on Descendant, but you are making Bonds of Ancestry free. And that's 4 damage, at minimum 4 damage for free after a Descendant Gustwave. And then you can do some crazy stuff. Depending on how far into the game you are and what's in the graveyard, you can then go and find ridiculous cards, banish them, and play them almost like a mini Katsu trigger. I think the interesting thing about that is there are a couple of conditions. You have to have the card in the graveyard already. So Bonds of Ancestry reads combo. If a card with Gustwave in its name was the last attack this combat chain, this costs 2 less to play and has go again. And when this attacks, so it's not even an on hit, when this attacks, you may banish a card with combo from your graveyard. If you do, search your deck for a card with the same name, banish it, then shuffle. You may play it this combat chain. So what that means is, even if you've got a blue Whelming Gustwave, for example, in graveyard, you can go and find the red in your deck and banish it and play it. But you do have to have one of them in graveyard, and you do have to have one of them in deck to go and find. So there may be a couple of issues when you lose sight of what's in the graveyard and you fail to find because you've picked the wrong card.
And I guess does this lend the deck to blocking a bit more, or do you find that just playing aggressively manages to fill your graveyard with the cards needed to make Bonds of Ancestry work?
Yeah, it's a really good point. It makes blocking feel slightly less bad. If you're blocking with a Dishonor, for example, you might actually be setting yourself up for a better turn in 1 or 2 turns' time. I think in the majority of matchups, you're trying to be the aggressor as Katsu. And I think what people do when they first start playing Katsu is they look at their hand and think, oh, I haven't got anything good here, I'll block. And then I'll try again next turn. And there absolutely is a time to do that. But a lot of times, if you've got a starter, or if you've got a Be Like Water, or if you've got 100 Winds in your hand, you can mix things up. So you might... A cookie cutter turn might be Kodachi, 1 cost card or 0 cost card with go again, and then see if they're gonna let you get the master trigger. Now, obviously, most of the time they're not. What you might want to do is dissociate that action card, that attack action card, from the master trigger link, and bring it forward 1, so that then they have a choice to make. Are they going to let the attack action hit? Are they going to block your spinning wheel kick for 4 with 2 cards or some equipment to stop you getting the Katsu trigger? You can ask some really interesting questions with how the order you play the cards in, and you can bait people with maybe a Be Like Water, for 3 or even a blue Be Like Water. This is why I changed the 100 Winds into a Be Like Water, because you've got a blue 0 cost that can act as a starter for any of those 3 combo lines. So depending on what's in your hand, you can throw that out there. If they're going to block a one power card with an attack action card in their hand, I'm happy with that. If they're not going to block it and it gives me a starter, 1 damage plus the ability to go and Katsu a card, I'm happy with that. So you've got to think about what you want from your turn and how you can engineer the best turn
And
with what you've got.
And I think this is really interesting. Cards like Be Like Water Blue, where they're presenting a really difficult proposition for your opponent, because they want to block it because they don't want you to start a huge combo chain, which if they let it through, not only can you change its name, you can also use Katsu's ability.
Yeah.
And that means they're really tempted to throw some, equipment at it. The best way, they want to use their blocking as efficiently as possible. So if something's coming in for 1, you want to throw a piece of 1 block of equipment on it. But equipment is basically what's stopping Mask of Momentum from essentially saying, once per turn, you suddenly your opponent is playing with 3 cards every turn, because they have to block. Well, they don't have to, but they're really incentivized to block Mask of Momentum every turn. And as soon as they run out of equipment, Mask just becomes incredible, because now it's costing them a card. So whatever other propositions you can throw down, like small little blocks, like 1, if they block it for 3, it's like Be Like Water's coming in for 3, right? Like, because they've wasted 2 blocks.
It's an inefficient block.
Yeah. That's really, really cool. And I think these Be Like Waters, are they working for you? Do you find that opponents let them through, or do you find that they're a big block target? They've almost got taunt with it, as it were.
No, so you're on the right path there. I'm really liking it in the deck, and it gives you that option. And I am finding most people let it through because they don't want to block inefficiently. So it's a good way of getting the starter, the Katsu trigger, in 1 off a 0 cost, or what it becomes is a 1 cost card, but it lets you fix a hand before it's gone wrong, if that makes sense. Obviously it's not a combo card, so swapping the 100 Winds, which is a combo card, 1 damage, potentially 2 if you've got a combo with the 100 Winds line, swapping that out was a bit of a decision, but I think the thing I love about Katsu is asking my opponent to think about the block they're making, and whether they are going to block, whether they're not going to block, whether they're going to block with equipment. Are they going to block it with a one block a piece of equipment and then risk the Ancestral Empowerment coming in over the top, which gets me another card and a Katsu trigger and a starter? Are they going to risk the Art of War turn, where it then becomes 2 in the reaction step? So I think it does offer a number of things, as well as the fact that it's a blue 0 cost card that, if nothing else, allows me to get Kodachi go again and have a Mars trigger turn. So it does multiple things.
I think you've covered the the main thing this deck is trying to do, which is, you're playing around this surging combo line. Before there are cards in here that are obviously not part of the surging line, and we'll talk about that in a second. But I thought before we did that, I thought maybe you could comment about which direction of the line are you kind of aiming to go for in the early game? What kind of do you start by trying to get a Dishonor in early and then switch to a Lord of Wind once you've built up your grave, or is that actually a decision that you're in control of? Does it work out that way?
So sometimes you have a surging and a whelming in hand, and you are thinking about whether you're going to go and Katsu the Magenshi or the Ancestral. For me, I think often that comes down to whether I have a Dishonor already in my graveyard. So if I have the ability to go and search for a Dishonor off of Bonds of Ancestry, then I'll probably go down that line. I think a red surging into a red whelming, into a red bonds, into a red surging into red descendant, into red bonds, into red into blue dishonor is 17 damage off of 2 resources.
That's crazy.
Yeah. Is that right? 18 damage, sorry. 18 damage off of 2 resources. The surging into whelming is 9, plus the Magenchi is 14, and then Lord of Wind could vary depending on how many of those cards you have in graveyard. So you're right, you're not always in control of that. It depends on the context of the game in hand. If you've already thrown out a few surgings and whelmings, then by all means go and get the Magenchi and threaten the card recursion, threaten the Lord of Wind. But for pure blockability, the full dishonor line is ridiculous, and they all have breakpoint blocks. So 5, 5, 4, 4. They're not going to be able to block it all, so they have to make a decision whether they think you've got the cards to make that line happen. And I thought, when I started running that line, I thought everyone would block it, no one would let Dishonor hit. Over the weekend, I've hit Dishonor 4 times. Twice against Riptide, once against a Katsu, and once against... Oh, who was it? I think it was Arachne.
Yeah.
And if you hit a Dishonor against Riptide, their game's over. They can't win.
Yeah.
I think the way they're building the decks and the hero ability on that card, they're not going to win. Similarly for Katsu, it's hard to come back from that. Oh, I did it to a Kano as well, so 5. Kano's dead in the water.
Yeah, I was going to say, I mean, that's rough for Kano too.
And people like Viserai as well, their decks just don't sing when you get that line off. Now, I think when people get used to it, they're not going to let it hit. It will take a period of adjustment. So it's interesting to get it working while I can. It's just so much damage. It doesn't happen every turn, obviously, but when it happens, it's so much damage. It's not blockable in its full extent, and they're having to gamble. Do you let all this damage through so they can block the final piece, or if you let damage through early, are they going to go and find the pieces in the middle that they need? This is what I love about Katsu, as I say, is the questions that it asks. So,
and I think the other thing is, like, it sounds like this incredible combo, and people might be thinking, well, how often are you going to get that off? And you're not going to get it off every game, but realistically, when you're playing a card like Heart and Cross Trap, when and you're making your Surging Strike cost 0, you actually only need Surging Strike, Bonds, and a 0 cost, and then if the Surging Strike hits, you fetch the Descendant, or the Descendant Gust Wave, and then and that's a 3-card combo. To if the grave is set up, you're doing the full combo from 3 cards if they're letting the Surging hit.
14 damage off of 2 resources paid for a common piece of equipment.
Yeah.
And it asks the question. Some people are going to block it very well, some people aren't. And they're going to come a cropper. So that, you're right, that is the main combo line we run. The other combo pieces we've talked about, 100 wins, which I was running the red and the blue, now just the red and the Winds of Eternity. For me, it just provides consistency. A 3 power go again with combo, so I can go and fetch it off of a Katsu if I need to extend a turn. I can go and fetch it off of Ancestral if it's in graveyard. And again, if I need to just 100 wins into a Winds of Eternity for 7 damage and some card recursion, I'll go for it.
Yeah, it's pretty tidy, right? Like if you've got an Art of War down and you come in for 100 wins for 4, and then even better, you come in for 100 wins for 3 and you play Art of War in the reaction step, and then Katsu fetch another 100 wins, and now it's coming in for 5. It's just a nice little, like, I remember you talking about 100 wins and how people who are coming to Katsu for the first time, they might be looking at this and being like, oh, it's classic Ninja, it's all go again, nothing to worry about, it's just like playing Fi. That wasn't the situation with Katsu.
No,
it was like,
not originally.
You get hands sometimes you had no go again. If you're not comboing, you don't get go again. And 100 wins was kind of, it was like, wow, it's a combo card that has go again. I don't have to do anything to get it. Yeah. It's always there, and that was kind of huge at the time.
Yeah.
So it's crazy looking at stuff like Descendant and like Spinning Wheel Kick and being like, oh wow, now finally it has go again. We don't have to worry about bricking anymore.
I mean, it still does happen. As with any deck, you will get hands that brick. But you're right, there is a bit more consistency. And in my Tigers deck, I'm running 9 copies of 100 wins. It just offers you that consistency. If you need to go and get, if one of them hits and you can go and get another one off of Katsu, you've got 4 free damage with go again, or lower depending on which color you can go and get. But yeah, I think it does add something. And even though it's a 2-block, I'm still running with it for now. That may change. There may cease to be space for it. But at the moment, it's doing me well. The other combo pieces to talk about are Spinning Wheel Kick and Cyclone Roundhouse. In my main deck, I'm running 2 Spinning Wheel Kick, 1 for 4 with go again. The combo, not that important. If you manage to combo it off each other or off of a Be Like Water with the Twin Twisters starter, then it gains +1, and if it hits, put it on the bottom of the deck, which is again useful in certain matchups like Oldham and Bravo, where they might try and fatigue you, or even Assassin, where they might try and fatigue you. It combos off itself, which is interesting, so you can do the 2 together and get 9 damage off of 2 resources. The key for me though is the Cyclone Roundhouse, which is the finisher for that line. Costs 2. If Spinning Wheel Kick was the last attack this combat chain, this has, at the beginning of the reaction step, banish a random defending card from each chain link, and it comes in for 5 damage. So it's a finisher, doesn't have go again. However, it is a combo card, so Breeze Rider Boots could give it go again. But more importantly, in matchups where they're likely to block with equipment, like Oldham, blocking a Kodachi with a piece of equipment, you can banish that. And if that happens to their shield, for example, Rampart, and you get rid of their shield, that's a huge gain for the rest of the game in terms of their ability to block chip damage. I've not seen it work properly in Talishar yet, but it is a random defending card from each chain link. So I also assume that if they block in the defense step, they block this card in the defense step, it can also banish off of its own chain link, but yet to see the release notes, so that may well not be the case.
That seems to be what the card's suggesting, and that's what I when I looked at this card for the first time, I got very hung up on the equipment destruction potential of this card, and then actually the more I looked at it, I realized this is actually kind of a crazy finisher. Because how do you block this?
How do you block it?
If you 2-card block it, they're coming in for 5. They're coming for 5 damage. It's not an insignificant chunk of damage. You 2-card block it, you're going to take 2 damage.
Still take 2 damage.
If you block them with a 3-block and a 2-block, you might even take 3 damage. If you literally cannot 1-card block it, you might as well not bother.
Unless you've got a reaction.
Yeah, you really need a reaction, and that's fair enough. But that's actually kind of crazy. And there are some heroes that do care about recursion from the grave. Heroes like Azalea, for example, they'll want to fetch back some relevant, red in the ledgers using, they might be running like Memorial Grounds and things like that. It's kind of
even decks that run Remembrance, like if you're blocking with a Crippling Crush in a Bravo matchup and they want to go and get that back later on, they're not going to get it back. So banishing is important. Assassins, obviously, if you banish their equipment, they can't get it back from the graveyard for 2 silvers either. So it does have a very interesting effect. And I have 2 Spinning Wheel Kick, 1 Cyclone Roundhouse in the main deck, and I can add a 2nd Cyclone Roundhouse in the Oldham matchup. You'll notice a lack of the Twin Twisters card starter. Um, it came down to the balance of zero costs in the deck. So we can use Be Like Water as a starter for the Twin Twisters line, but as we've already said, the spinning wheel kick already has Go Again innately, so it can act as a mini starter. It's not like Soulbead Strike into Torrent of, into Rushing River or Crane Dance. Sorry, Torrent of Tempo into Rushing River or Soulbead Strike into Crane Dance. You don't have that conditional Go Again on both the cards. You have innate Go Again on both the cards. But Katsu is reliant on having zero cost cards in hand to discard and go and find combo pieces. So we couldn't put too many one cost cards or too many two cost cards in the deck because you just lose that ability to go and find your cards.
Yeah, and I think this is what Outsiders has given Katsu is, we talked about this earlier, but it's combo starters that are also combo themselves. Like, you don't need the Twin Twisters to pull off the spinning wheel kick into Cyclone, because the spinning wheel kick has Go Again. It's not like the old days where it's like you couldn't start, if you wanted to go whelming Magenshi, you needed to give whelming Go Again with Snaps or Razor or with Breeze Rider boots. And this spinning wheel kick into Cyclone Roundhouse is kind of a nice tidy
it's a nice 3-cost
it matches up really nicely. It's a 3 cards, your red, your spinning wheel kick, your 0 cost, that could be any card in the deck basically, and then your blue. The only issue, of course, is you really don't want your yellows to cost anything because you can't pitch them for Kodachis, and that's the main problem. It's like, this used to be, it's like, how do you actually get this card out of your hand, right? Like, it's tricky sometimes. But
you're right. But with the number of innate Go Again 1-cost cards in the deck, like Spinning Wheel Kick, like Descendant Gustwave, you can often pitch that yellow away and use 2 cards that cost 1 with Go Again. So that's not been as big an issue as I thought it would be. But it is something to be aware of when you're building the deck. Just be aware of the mix of costs of cards, like with your Bonds, with your Descendants. They all cost more than 0. So just be aware of what you're putting in the deck.
And I think on that, I mean, you do have this 1 copy of Take the Tempo here.
That started off as a 2 of, and it's now a 1 of.
It's a really good card. Do you just find that it costs 1, so you can't banish it? Was it just not performing as well as you liked?
It offers that choice, and offer blue and a Take the Tempo. You can often get Kodachi Take the Tempo and make them 2-block the Take the Tempo, because they don't want you to draw the mask and they don't want you to draw banish off of the Take the Tempo.
Yeah,
but it doesn't have Go Again. It costs 1. It's a very useful card in certain situations, but often you'll end up arsenaling it and then saving it for a couple of turns down the way, or you might even draw it off a mask and not be able to play it because you've not got the resources left. Like, it's just a bit awkward, and having 2 of them in the deck felt a bit excessive. It's useful when it works, and sometimes you just think, oh, I wish it was a combo card. You know?
It's like, I find this card's really, really good in aggro mirrors. You come up against an aggro dash, you might, it might be it might be your mask hit as well. And it's just like they can't let it hit, because you'll just then be able to out aggro them with a 6-card hand or something crazy.
One of my favorite turns, for example, is just Kodachi against aggro. Is Kodachi 100 wins for the mask trigger, which they block with a single card because they think, oh, we can stop this going any further, and then just drop in the Take the Tempo and ask for another 2 cards, and often that gets you what you need. Which is literally, as the card says, you're taking the tempo back because they've only got 1 card to play the next turn. So people are worried about it. It's nice to have as a post mask trigger chain link. It can be very useful if you're on the front foot, but sometimes it's just a bit of a pain.
The other thing is, of course, when you're not running slaps, you
Exactly.
do
You can't
lose
then,
the
yeah.
take tempo snaps threat, which can
Yes.
sometimes be like, you know, it occasionally gets
It can make the
blocks because
difference.
people are afraid of that. But
So just we've talked through pretty much all of the ninja combo cards. Just to mention Ancestral Empowerment, ridiculous card. I think you need 3 of in this deck. Having it on a Be Like Water, having it on a Master Trigger, 100 wins, for example, and pushing it over the single card block. Having it on a Surging Strike and pushing it over to get the hits, so that you're not only getting the card from the Ancestral, but you're also getting the Katsu trigger, is a great thing to have. Similar to the Breaking Scales effect, but it gives you a card as well, and it doesn't need the combo, it just needs a ninja card. And then we've got the generics in the deck, which is E-Strike, Snatch, and Art of War. I think Art of War speaks for itself. Although 90% of the time you're going to be banishing a card for draw 2 and then +1/+1, you can often get 3 or 4 damage out of an Art of War turn. Extra damage, sorry, just by having wide turns, and it gives you a chance to fix your hand if you need to banish a card that's not got go again, for example, like a Snatch, and try and draw more amenable cards. What I'm learning, as with every deck I've played Art of War in, it's not always an instant play.
Yeah.
The turn that you draw it, sometimes you need to just play out your hand, arsenal the Art of War, wait for the Tunic trigger to come up, and then go. But when you have it in the right circumstances, it's phenomenal.
I think something you've always said, Simon, which I think is really important for understanding Katsu, is that every single attack in this deck has an on-hit effect because of Katsu, irrespective of what its actual on-hit effect. Every card has the on-hit effect. If this is the first card this turn that hits, you can do Katsu's ability, and that just gives so much value to Art of War and to Ancestral Empowerment, because not only have you got Mask on the field, so you're potentially drawing a card, you're potentially also being able to use Katsu's ability when you want to use it most, which is is generally right as early as possible, right? Like when you've got full, you want to be able to
you've got a full hand, you can make a plan about the turn that you want to play.
You might be like, well, I've only got 1/0 costs, but now because my first attack hasn't hit, I actually need to play that in order to do anything else. So now I can't Katsu, even though you still get an opportunity to if they fully block the first attack. So all these cards that give +1 at weird points that your opponent might not be able to deal with just feel so strong.
Absolutely, I completely agree. And we'll come back round to the Shuriken in a minute, because
I'm so looking forward to this time. I'd be like, it's Shuriken day. Shuriken day.
It's been a little gem. Let me just mention the E-Strikes and the Snatch. Initially, I had I didn't have these generics in the deck. I think the deck was completely ninja cards. And this, full disclosure, this was based off a deck that Jamie Faulkner put together in about 5 minutes, and just said, look, I like all these ninja cards, I want to play them together. And I said, oh, let me have a look. And I changed a few things around, and I've gone off in a slightly different direction. But thanks to Jamie for brewing it immediately after all the spoilers were out. So I think initially I had the Snatchers were Soul Bead Strikes. So they are ninja cards. They're 0 cost 4. It has go again if it hits, so it's again asking a question. The problem I had with it is, off a 1 card hand, no one cares if you've got go again or not, so they can just take 4 damage. With Snatch, in the majority of matchups, a 1 card hand can turn into, oh, are you going to let me replenish my arsenal and have a 5 card hand next turn? So it does ask more of a blocking question with Snatch. However, it doesn't apply go again. We can't get go again because we've not got snaps, so it is a little bit of a finisher rather than anything else.
I think this is something that we sort of ended up playing with in Fi as well, which was we ended up running 3 red snatch and 3 blue snatch, because
Yeah.
it is essentially just, if you can have 5 card, the arsenal in this game is balanced by, theoretically you can't have a 5 card turn every single turn. You know, you have to not use your full hand one turn to put a card in the arsenal, right? That, you know, obviously lots of heroes break that rule, but that's the basic principle.
Ponder tokens which do break that rule.
Ponder breaks that rule, and Snatch breaks that rule, because Snatch allows you to do a full turn, use every single card you have, and then that Snatch at the end hits, and then you put a card in arsenal. And in a hero like Katsu, where I can't actually see a single card in this deck that you wouldn't realistically want in the arsenal. Even the combo enders, you'll probably still be able to get them out at some point, and they all cost 0 anyway, so oh no, I guess at some point I'll go again and throw out a 2. It's really, really good value.
And that coming to that point leads me on to the Shuriken, actually, because there is so initially that started as a Knives Out, a one of Knives Out, and Knives Out reads that daggers get +1 this turn. So you're looking at a blue 0 cost 3 block that gives you a potentially +2 damage in a turn. Not bad. And there is the potential to use it as an attack reaction. So it is an attack reaction, sorry. So there is the potential to win a game if they don't block Kadachi and they're on 2 and they don't have a defense reaction, blah, blah, blah. There is a potential for it to win you a game. I just found it really awkward, because by the time you want it, they're blocking all your Kadachis anyway. And
this is Knives Out.
You're not Knives Out, sorry. You're not gonna put it in your arsenal. It just felt really awkward. So I thought, well, why don't I switch it for a Shuriken? It's an item. It doesn't have go again. It doesn't block. But there is so much innate go again in this deck. I often finish a turn with an action point. So if you have a Shuriken in arsenal, or if you have a Shuriken in your hand that you don't need to pitch for everything else, because don't forget it's 0 blue cost, so you can use it to fund a turn. Or if you've got it hanging over at the left, if you draw it off a mask, if you draw it off an ancestral, and you've got it hanging around at the end of turn, you just slap it on the board. And then you've got 2 breaking scales, effectively, at any moment. So they can't just overblock a Surging by 1. Sorry, not a Surging. Whelming Gustwave by 1. They have to by 2. And that, again, it makes them question and make the decision harder. So it's a one of, because it's slightly tricky at the moment, but it's been really useful, actually, much more useful than I thought it was going to be, and I'm glad I've got it in the deck. So there is potential if I needed to increase the blue count. There is a potential, and looking at the sideboard, the Floating Dojo could be reduced to a 2, and I could have 2 Shurikens, for example, where that could be a potential swap.
Yeah, I think it's always a risky one. Like with these cards that don't block at all, because you do get into situations with Ninja where everything hasn't gone right, and you are actually blocking out. Now, Ninja actually blocks surprisingly well, because a lot of your combo pieces block for 3, and you have not as many as they used to, but a lot of them do. And back in the day, you could just hold a blue and try and Kodachi chip them down. And I do always worry about these no blocks, because I don't want to end up with Art of War and an Art of War that I had to pitch in a pinch, for example, and a Shuriken in one hand, and then suddenly I can only block 5 and then I lose the game, kind of thing. But I do love it, and I think it's really interesting, and I think it's going to take a lot of experimenting, and I think a one-of feels really good.
The upside is there, definitely there. And I'm so far, I'm really happy with it. If I look at the stats on the deck, on the card stats, how many times have I played it? I've seen it 4 times. I've had it in the game for about a couple of days now. I've seen it 4 times. I've pitched it twice, played it twice. So I'm enjoying it.
Let's we've basically
just to mention
go for it.
E-Strike.
Oh yeah.
It's just such a versatile card. It can save a hand if you get red in the ledger, for example, or if you haven't got an 8 go again, you can give yourself go again. 5 go again's not a bad shout. And if you just have a 2-card hand, you can just come in for 7 and present damage.
Yeah.
And I think that's pretty reasonable.
And draw a card. Sometimes you've got an E-Strike and a blue left, and you're just like, I'll draw a card. Maybe I'll draw a combo piece that I can arsenal. It's
absolutely
kind of nice.
So it's just, as I say, with the Snatch and the E-Strike, they started off as ninja cards. They've now become generics, useful 0-cost generics that have a purpose.
Should we talk about the should we talk about the sideboard? Because I think we've covered the main deck, and if people do have any more questions about the main 60 cards, do please do put a comment on the video, and Simon will work through.
What I feel, just to finish the 60 cards, what I feel is that it is really tight, and actually you have to be able to justify every card that's in there. I don't think it's a set 60 for me yet. I think there will be some movement, but it's playing well. I'm enjoying the interactions in there, and I think you can justify a change of direction if you build the deck differently. That's fine, but it can be tight. So any questions, happy to answer. And it's all my opinion, it's not set in stone, but I'm happy to talk to people about that anytime.
And we'll just cover the sideboard very quickly before we do want to do a really quick run through at the end of some of the cards that didn't quite make the cut. I think you've talked about Cyclone Roundhouse already, and we've talked about the equipment. Let's quickly talk about six defense reactions, and your choices for going for 6.
Good question. I think there are some matchups I like to run 3, like the Katsu Mirror. Now, some people might say, well, just go aggro for Katsu Mirror and try and outpace them. I think having the odd flick flack, because there are so many combo cards in there, if you've got a flick flack in Arsenal, for example, you're not blocking just for 4. You're probably getting an extra 6 block out of it. So 4 from the flick flack and an extra 2 from a combo card. Adding the extra 3 Sync Blows in for some matchups like the Bravo and the Dorinthia Azalea matchups, Rhinar even. I found them quite useful actually. I think having somewhere between 4 and 6 is probably the right answer for those decks where you want a consistent defense reaction presence, and you can still present a lot of damage off a 3-card or a 4-card hand with a defense reaction in Arsenal. The Sync Belows allow you to fix a hand sometimes, or try and fix a hand sometimes, and as I say, the Flick Flack gives you... It's a ridiculous card. I've forgotten how good it was.
It's so good. It's a 0-cost 6, right? That's so good.
It's a 0-cost 6 split over 2 cards. So it can stop a turn in its tracks.
And also, I think it's really important to remember that 2 cards that block for, a card blocking for a 4 is a lot better than a card blocking for 3, and a card blocking for 5 is really great. So,
and as I say, there are so many combo cards in the deck that it works. Yeah. So again, I don't include it in every matchup. I put 3 Flick Flacks in for the Katsu Mirror. I haven't been putting any in for Phi just because I think Phi has fewer breakpoints at 4, and it's a lot of 3 go again. That may well come back to bite me, but I only add the extra 3 Sync Belows in for the Bravo, Dorinthia, Rhinar, and Azalea.
Yeah. And I think that makes sense to me. I love a Sync. I think the hand fixing capability of Sync is very, very underrated. It sort of blocks 4, and a lot of the time it can improve a hand to the point where you're dealing a little bit additional damage on your turn. So it kind of, to me, feels like a really positive card. I mean, I know you're giving up a card in hand to do that, but I like it personally.
Now,
I'm a big fan of blocking.
Just a quick note on that. In the old school Katsu deck that I used to run with the surging strike lines, I did actually run 3 flick flacks and 2 red unmovables. Now there are enough blues in this deck to make that work in the Bravo and Dorinthia matchups. That could be quite useful, but I think actually the 0 cost 4 is enough at the moment, and I think keeping the blues for the pressure on your next turn is probably more important. So yeah, I'm happy with where the defense reaction spot is at the moment, but it's always under review. Having the 6 defense reactions in makes me sort of call it that mid-range aggro rather than just an aggro deck, and it can be, as you say, deceptively good at blocking when it needs to.
I think like it's just if you're a fab player and you block, then you're a mid-range player. It doesn't really matter what's in your deck. It feels that way sometimes. Yeah, it does. It 2 players take the exact same list. One of them plays it aggro, one of them plays it mid-range. But that's just the nature of fab.
Aggro issue recently. The last 3 cards, just to mention, there are Visit the Floating Dojo, and it's the Katsu Specialization from Outsiders. It's a 0 cost blue instant, and it allows you to put a Surging Strike and a card with combo from your graveyard on the top or the bottom of your deck. So you can either put 2 on the top, 2 on the bottom, or one of each. I've got it in there for the Icelander matchup as 3 extra blues, and I've got it in there for the Oldham and Guardian matchup for card recursion, but I haven't actually used it for its card recursion effects yet. I haven't had enough into Oldham yet.
It feels like a great way for LSS to sort of dent the capabilities of a full fatigue deck emerging in the meta, because this feels incredibly strong when you're down to just blue cards and you're able to just put surging. You're only net gaining 1 card, and you're losing a blue and getting a probably 2 reds back, and you can get it back for the next immediate turn. Yeah.
So it does have positives. Again, there is so much innate go again that you could use it at the end of your turn to set up your next turn. You could even use it at the end of your opponent's turn if you wanted to play funny business and work on card draw. It's an instant, so you can play it anytime you've got priority, even meaning you could set up the top of your deck on a Mass Trigger.
Yeah, it's an interesting one because you're obviously giving up a card to do that, and it's sort of like remorseless. No, what am I talking about? It's sort of like Remembrance. Yeah. So, but rather than 3 cards, you get 2, but you get to put them at the top of your deck.
Yeah.
And it's a blue, which is relevant. It's not really much of an opportunity cost to put this in. But
theoretically, it works in the deck. As I say, I've not really used it yet. The one thing I am looking forward to is seeing that artwork in real life, because I think it's phenomenal artwork. And interesting theory going around about the flavor text on that card being picked out as a potential hint for the name of the next draftable set, or next set release.
Yeah, Transcendence maybe
after Dusk Till Dawn,
or Skylark. I think it's I love the art of this set. I think Visit the Flowing Dojo and Silverwind Shuriken, and I know Silverwind is coming in cold foil. Even Dishonor is just the Shurikens are going to be our confirmed cold foil, which is super cool.
Beautiful.
Before we run through the cards that didn't make the cut, just a couple of basic questions that I know people might ask. The first one is, I think we may have touched on this, but just to reiterate, so which matchups would you run the Tunic over the Heart and Cross Strap at the moment?
So basically any matchups where you're running defense reactions. So if you think the game's going to need blocking and it's going to go longer, and it's going to last more than 3 to 5 turns, then you're going to get more out of the tunic than you would do out of the heart and cross strap.
Great answer. And
so, yeah, any Dorinthia, Bravo, Reinar, Azalea, I do put it in Icelander and Oldham as well.
And maybe Dramai as well.
Yeah, I haven't played against much Dramai. Illusionist would probably get the
they do. It depends what build, but I always like tunic.
It's nice to have the extra
in
resource.
Dramai because I just do. And lastly, or not lastly, on your null rune, so when you're up against Viserai, AB1, or do you try to aggro them with no AB at all? Do you have
Viserai is definitely AB1. I'll put the Tide Flippers in.
Yeah.
And it's the full aggro package, so the 60 cards you've seen there, but just swap out the Breeze Rider boots for the Tide Flippers.
I think it makes a lot more sense in Katsu. I know in Phi, for example, I don't want to keep comparing them, but they are the two main ninja adult heroes. Occasionally you just won't run AB, which personally I think is crazy. I always run AB, but I'm too scared. But I think in this deck you're not losing a huge amount
you
from...
have enough blues to make it work as well.
Yeah.
However, the good thing about Katsu versus Viserai is the number of 2 blocks that Viserai has in his deck and the number of breakpoints we offer with Katsu. So I think it does ask some interesting questions. And
obviously you're only running AB2, I mean, against Icelander and Kano. I assume you're running AB2 and you've not gone up to AB3. Is that because you don't really need it against Icelander and against Kano? You're just trying to kill them as quickly as possible? Basically,
yeah. I think having Null Rune 2, or AB2 should I say, against the Wizards is more of a security blanket than anything else. I think we've got enough blues and enough yellows to make it work. If I could justify squeezing in a third, like a chess piece, for example, of Null Rune, then there's a bit of potential because it stops the blue Ether Ice Vein, it takes the Ether Wildfire down a bit, but really what you're trying to do is race them anyway and just blast them out of the water.
And the last question I have is that if this Katsu deck, if Katsu does become kind of tier 1, do you see a space for Blazon Uri, the card from, I think it's Dynasty, the one that if it's Chain Link 4, it blocks for 5? Or do you think that even in a Katsu mirror, cross strap is going to be the way to go?
I think it's a good question. I haven't been playing it, as you can see. There could be a place for it. You could squeeze out a defense reaction and put the Blazon Uri in instead. But Katsu and Phi are really the only heroes that's going to be relevant in. If the mirrors are coming around all the time, then sure, why not? But its scope is less clear in Katsu than it was in Phi. You don't know when it's going to be useful.
Yeah, I think that is a fair point. Okay, that covers the deck. I think before we wrap up, we want to run just through some of the cards that came out in Outsiders from Ninja. I mean, we'll obviously skip over the ones that are in the deck, but I think, do you want to just start from the
first
beginning?
One I wanted to mention was the only Majestic that I'm not running in the deck that's come out in Outsiders is Headlead's Tail. Now, this is a 1-cost 3 go again, and it reads, when this attacks, name another card. Attack action cards with that name have +1 on this combat chain. So, if you are running a Tiger build in the new meta, this definitely has a place. Because you just named Crouching Tiger, and every Tiger you play that turn has +1.
Yeah.
So that works.
Feels pretty good.
Feels pretty good. If you're running 9 copies of 100 Wins, I think you can do this.
Yeah.
Right? I don't think it fits in my deck.
No.
But I think if you build a deck around it, there's definitely potential there.
I really like Head Leads the Tail, and I think it's really interesting.
Yeah,
I love the fact you can name itself. So it's always a one. Like, no, don't miss the fact this is always a 1 for 4. If you don't want to name anything else.
Yeah.
and I part of me wishes, so my dream is that if it could have worked on Kodachis, but unfortunately that is not the case.
Yeah.
That would have been pretty cool, but sadly not the case. But I want to find a space for Headley's to tell. I think it might be quite good in Ira, or at least the Ira deck that I use, because I run a lot of 100 wids. But anyway, we won't focus on that now. We'll move down.
I think it has use, but just not in this style deck.
Let's cover the head jab stuff, because we got a lot of that.
And head jab is being reprinted in this set, right? So head jab is a 3 power, go again, 0 cost, comes in all 3 colors. And now from Outsiders, so previously it was leading into the open the center and then fluster fist or pounding gale. Now we have 2 rare combo finishers for that head jab line. One is recoil, 0 cost for 3 combo. If head jab was the last attack this combat chain, this has, when this hits a hero, they put a card from their hand on top of their deck. So there is an element of disruption there. It's forcing a block, or they're losing a card either way. So it could be very useful in a sort of disruption style Katsu deck where you're running lots of attack reactions and you're able to bump that up after they've already blocked, so they're losing a minimum 2 cards. Could be useful with Art of War. I don't have space for the head jab and multiple lines in my deck.
And it doesn't have go again, which is also
it's a finisher because it doesn't have go again. The other one to note on that is 1-2 punch. And again, 1-2 punch is 0 cost, 3 combo card, no go again, and it reads, if head jab was the last attack this combat chain, this has, when this hits a hero, deal 2 damage. So deal 2 damage to them, sorry. So it's it's asking for a block or 5 total damage, if not more. So I think, again, there are uses of it. It's not going to be it's not, probably not that you're not going to see it ever, but it's just quite niche.
Yeah, it kind of reminds me of the
limited. It's going to be great.
Yeah, and they kind of remind me of the rupture cards from Uprising.
Touch.
Yeah, I like the idea that you've got this basically 2 cards combo chain of like head jab and one other card, and I think in, like you said, Simon, in sealed, these could be really good. You arsenal a 1-2 punch and you wait for your head jab to come around, and you can play head jab at the end of some other stuff you've done that feels nice, or you can fetch with Katsu as well. But they feel more like cards that Benji might enjoy playing more than Katsu maybe, but we'll see how the sealed experience pans out. So that's the head jab stuff. Let's talk very briefly about back heel kick. That's another card that comes off the twin twisters. So spinning wheel kick made it in, but back heel kick did not.
So again, it's a 0 cost 3 power card with combo. No go again. No go again.
No go again.
It reads, if Twin Twisters was the last attack this combat chain, this has, if back heel kick would gain attack, instead it gains that much +1. So if you're running a deck that lives off attack reactions and is going to boost this card, then sure, go ahead, you can do some crazy damage. But that's not my deck. So it does have a purpose. I think in limited it's going to be interesting to see if you've got a few attack reactions in hand. It could work great. But for me, it's not got go again. It's not fitting with the type of deck that I wanted to build.
Makes sense to me too. I don't think we need to talk about that one too much longer.
The other one you mentioned at the beginning was Flick Knives. Obviously, I think if you're building a deck around Concealed Blade, which is a majestic,
Where is it?
allowing target assassin or ninja attack action card gains +1,
I've lost
and when this hits, equip a dagger from your inventory.
Concealed Blade, sorry. I just want to talk about Concealed Blade. I really like this card, and I think you can just ignore the second part of the text. I think it's a lunging press that blocks for 3. I don't think that's terrible, and I think actually in low health formats, I think we'll see this card being used just as a way of essentially winning the game. You know, we talked about how good Ancestral Empowerment is, how good Art of War is, and actually just a blue that has utility, it might actually be good enough to make the cut.
I mean, I
don't
could
think
swap it in for Shuriken, but you have to use it that turn. You can't sort of bank it for later.
I think that's the problem that Katsu has. That's, you know, Simon, you spoke about this. It's such a tight 60 cards, and it's such a tight sideboard. Whenever you run Ninja, you have a tight sideboard because you need to run 2 weapons, so you automatically have one less slot than everyone else, which sucks. I can see this being if you really don't care about what your blues do. Like, for example, I actually think this card will probably see play in Fi. In a ninja attack heavy Fi. I know some Fi builds don't run that many ninja cards, but in a ninja attack heavy Fi build, I think this is just a good utility card that you can play out, but and you can just ignore the dagger equipping part if that's not part of your game plan. Also, Azalea does have cards now that kill daggers, so maybe it's just worth running just because you might need to bring it back.
But it doesn't go back to your inventory, it goes to graveyard, so you would need a spare.
Oh yeah, not going to do that. Unless Azalea is really good.
I mean, she is pretty good now.
Are you not going to run the, you know, start with 2 Zephyr Needle, 3 copies of Concealed Blade, bring in the Kadachis for the late game?
Doesn't sit well with me. Like, I mean, anyone who's played Zephyr Needle against Chain or Dorinthia in the Blitz meta, and then had to play half a game with only 1 Kadachi, is probably wary of losing their weapons in Ninja.
Is there any other cards, Simon, that you wanted to talk about?
I mean, there's a host of these Ninja Assassin attack action cards that I think are looking good for limited play, but they're not really suiting what I was trying to build. The big one we said was the Mask of Many Faces, which has the potential for 1 nutty turn in a game, and if you've only got 20 life like in Blitz, I think that's probably reasonable, but in CC I think it's probably just slightly underpowered compared to the other options we have.
You can do some really crazy stuff, like you start with Surging, you then pop Mask, and then you play a Whelming, but the Whelming is now called Surging, and then you play another Whelming, and then you play a Magenchi's or whatever, and it's like, what is going on? This is crazy. Or, you know, in Commoner, like, this is so good in Commoner because now Red Whelming Gust Wave is always Snatch. Like, you can just use this mask to make your first attack, whatever it is you just, well, now it's called Surging, so this Whelming is now a Snatch, which is really, really cool. I think this card's super sick. I love when LSS print common equipment that might not necessarily be like gonna be in the CC decks, but this is such a good deck card for if you want to start a more budget Ninja deck. And, you know, we may have some content coming up soon where we get to explore some of that. So really fantastic card. I really, really like it. But yeah, I agree. You know, I'd love to see a CC deck that maybe is just pure aggro and does run this in one matchup, but who knows, eh?
So I think that's probably a good time to start wrapping up.
Yeah, I think, you know, we've talked a lot. It's like an hour and 20 minutes, but I've personally really enjoyed running through it with you, Simon, and I think
enjoyed talking about it.
So, you know, these things are, you know, like what I think hopefully people appreciate us actually taking the time to go into a lot of detail rather than skimming over stuff. But if there is anything that we didn't cover, again, like we said, please do let us know. And I thought, just to sum up,
this is just an initial impression of what is possible with these cards in this deck. I'm not claiming this is a meta deck. I'm not claiming this is going to be tier S. I'm just saying this is what I'm enjoying running at the moment. I've tested a few cards, and this is my version of Katsu right now. Feel free to ask any questions you want in the comments, and I will try and respond to those that come up. But don't come complaining when it's not a meta deck in 6 weeks' time.
Yeah, and obviously we put all of our stuff out on YouTube. We don't we don't paywall anything. Obviously, if you really want the latest stuff, you can join as a patron. We do chat on the Discord about like the way we're building things, and that is an option if you want a more direct like forum with us. But obviously, we are still answering questions in the comments for anyone. So please do. And yeah, before we finish up, Simon, I just thought maybe you could comment, like, obviously you've always been a Katsu fan. Like, how does it feel to, we don't know yet how Katsu's going to do in the CC meta, but it must be really exciting to essentially have just been given a goodie bag of new cards and new tools for a hero that you love playing.
My takeaway so far is that it's a lot more consistent than the Katsu of old, and you can generally fix most hands before they become a problem. So if you liked Katsu before, but you didn't like bricking, or you thought it was a bit hit or miss, then give it a go. Let me know how you get on. And good luck.
Thanks for joining us, everyone. And we'll see you in the next one.
See you soon.
Bye.